Some people genuinely love you, but the friendship just isn't built to go where you want to go. Good morning and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. How are we all doing, guys? I'm your host, Chantel. Welcome back to my loyal listeners. Happy Thursday. And if this is your first time hearing my voice, welcome to the Sage Sorority, where your only dues are your ears. Over here, we talk about sisterhood, self-concept, and personal development for women in their 30s and 40s. And we're here every Thursday in your ears. So it is December. We are full-fledged in December. There's no excuses. And before you know it, the month and the year will be over. Are we feeling overstimulated? I am doing okay, to be honest. I probably get more sentimental and thoughtful this time of year, but I do like to keep it busy, as I mentioned. And I don't know about you guys, but the end of the year really makes me reflect on everything. Like, I know that it's really common, obviously, to feel reflective at this time, but it's a double whammy for me because my birthday is on December 31st. So it just feels super intense. Not only is it a new year, it's a birthday, it is all the things. And I've been doing a lot of that lately. And this episode is tied into that. So I don't think we need to be super dramatic and want to just erase everything from our lives and start off in a new year, new you type of way. But I do think a gentle check-in with yourself is appropriate. How are you actually feeling in your relationships right now? And lately, I've been personally noticing like a quiet exhaustion. It's not always super obvious, but it's definitely there. This feeling when you're showing up, you're present, you're emotionally available, and yet something still feels off. And there's a lack of reciprocity and the balance just doesn't feel even keeled. You know what I mean? So today we are talking about friendship fatigue. This is part 4 in the Sisterhood Chronicles. For those that are new or unfamiliar, the Sisterhood Chronicles is our ongoing series where we dive into everything sisterhood and friendship. At the Sage Sorority, friendship and female friendship is a huge pinnacle and a huge reason why I do what I do. And it's something that I don't think gets enough detailed attention. Our friendship, frankly put, looks a lot different in our 30s and 40s than it did in our teens and our 20s. And we're never scared to unpack and go into granular detail into what that looks like, how it's feeling, and how it's showing up in our lives. So it's one of my favorite topics to discuss. And coincidentally, it is one of the most popular pods that we have on the Sage Sorority. You guys love the friendship pod. So definitely look for more of that in 2026. I just want to make sure I'm giving it the care and attention that it needs. And we are long overdue for another episode in the Sisterhood Chronicles. So here we are. And I think going back to my original point about friendship fatigue and that subtle tiredness that a lot of us carry around, I think it also ties in with friendship compatibility, which honestly explains so much about why sometimes adult friendships can just feel the way they do. And this isn't about ranting or calling anyone out. It's really just about understanding something that you might already be feeling and maybe helping you have some language for it. Because I really think when we can name things, we can move through not only the new year, but in general with a little bit more clarity, hopefully a bit more ease, and ideally way less emotional weight. So whether you're on your commute or you're at your desk, you've got your tea, your coffee, your wine, or your water, let's go. And whether you are a returning listener or a newbie, please take a moment to rate and review the show. Leave me a comment on Spotify if you're a Spotify girly, but it takes literally less than 10 seconds and it makes such a world of a difference. I've got big dreams for this show in 2026 and beyond. And for those of you that don't know, there's no real algorithm on podcasting, so it truly matters to leave a review and share it with a friend because that's the only way that shows grow. And I want this show to grow big because I feel like the Sage Sorority really represents so many women out there, and I want more women in their 30s and 40s to be exposed to it and listen and follow along. So if you agree, then do me a little favor, consider it a Christmas gift and a birthday gift. Leave a review, share the pod with a friend, and leave me a comment on Spotify. So let's talk about what friendship fatigue can feel like and how it kind of manifests itself IRL. So I think it's something that a lot of us feel at different ebbs and flows of our relationship, but it's not about having too many friends or feeling like socially burned out. It's a little bit more specific than that. And it's like a tiredness that maybe builds up, maybe even a little bit of animosity or resentment when maybe you feel like you're consistently the one doing more of the emotional heavy lifting in a relationship. Now, I think it's important to add in that, like any relationship, and I learned this from Brene Brown, it's very unlikely that it'll ever be 50-50. We talk about a lot about 50-50 in dating, but I don't think it really can always exist on the same level in any type of relationship. Friends, coworkers, family, whatever. Someone's going to give 70 at one point, someone's going to give 30, maybe someone's going to do 60, you're going to do 40, and vice versa, right? And that can be in any given moment, or that can be for long stretches of time. For example, if you are a single person and you are in close community with someone who has young children, when and how they can show up will probably look very different than yours. There may be some overlap, ideally, there may not be. And then that could change, right? All of a sudden, their kids are 8 years old or 7 years old, and they've got full-time school and extracurriculars, and you find yourself with way more time. Or they're a new mom, newborn stage, so she's got loads of time. And it just seems to chip away and chip away and chip away as her kids get older. Everyone's lives are different. And those are just really easy examples that I'm using. And this can be little things like, that feeling where you're always the one checking in, you're sending long voice notes, you remember what they told you 3 weeks ago about that work thing, you follow up on stuff that matters to them. And then when you need something or you just want to share something, the energy just doesn't come back in the same way. And it's not about anyone being rude. It's just light or vague or really late or just surface. And the thing is, what happens when you are naturally maybe an unavailable person, or you are someone who creates a lot of space for your relationships or makes the time, people just get used to it. And they can, unfortunately, not always, but it does happen, they kind of just stop noticing the effort, and what you perceive as effort, which it is, just becomes your baseline. Because it's just who you are. And that's where the fatigue creeps in, because that gap is getting wider and wider. And it's not because you're doing too much, but it's because the friendship just isn't meeting you where you are or where you would like to be. I really hope that this is making sense. It's that feeling of like, why do I feel more invested or more connected to this person than they seem to feel to me? Or why does it seem like I'm more interested or invested in this relationship than this person seems to be for me? Or does this friendship only really exist when I'm the one making it happen? And the fatigue might kick in because you're like, oh, it's because I'm the one carrying this. And I'm showing up maybe at a 10 for someone who's showing me a 3 today and maybe an 8 tomorrow, but consistently over time, it always averages out to a 5. And again, I think when we hear this, we often think malicious, but it might just be their capacity, their desire, or both. This is where compatibility comes in. And if you remember from the previous episode about attraction, compatibility, and capacity, it really is the same metric and framework for any relationship that you have in your life, including your friends. Because the second you stop making it about effort and you start looking at maybe like alignment, things really do click. Some people just don't have the emotional range that you want in that current moment. It's just like how I said in that previous episode. The man might not have capacity for the type of relationship that you want in this moment. It's the same idea. Some people don't show closeness the way you do. Some people only have bandwidth for surface level friendships right now. And I want to add like a little asterisk here, because if you are someone who maybe wants a lot of depth in their life and gives a lot of depth to their relationships, this may be something that's difficult to accept and absorb and to understand. And I'm truly speaking of myself, because the idea of having only surface level relationships would send me into oblivion. Like, I can't imagine having a bunch of friends or a few friends and there's no real depth to our relationship. I feel like I would really struggle, because it's like, how many times can I see people and there's nothing there? Like, I feel like I would really struggle. Now, that doesn't mean that you should overshare, and that doesn't mean that you should overfunction. And that's something that I definitely have to work on moving into 2026 and beyond, is the overfunctioning. But I just can't imagine having friends that are very surface level. But that's no judgment. It just doesn't work for me. And for some people, that is all they want. That is all they have the energy for. And that's fine. Whatever it is, stand on it, is what I always say. And some people genuinely love you, but the friendship just isn't built to go where you want to go. And I also think that sometimes people can genuinely love you, but they have a core nucleus of friends and they don't really see much outside of that. And that is one thing that I think has been really like a bitter pill to swallow. I've been in London 7 years and you learn a lot, and a lot you can only learn by looking at things in hindsight. And, I've met a ton of people here, and it's because I want to. It's because I put myself out there. It's because it's genuinely something that brings me joy in my life, right? I'm not necessarily a quantity over quality person, like not so ever. I just believe you can have quantity and quality, right? But one thing that I have definitely noticed is, and I really do struggle because I don't know if it's a cultural thing, and I do think it partially is that I will meet someone, we get on, we hit it off, but the friendship will only ever stay between us. Like there will be no mixing and mingling. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of women have different perspectives on this, and I'm not going to say anyone's invalid or valid. I think it's just personal experience. I understand that, but then I also don't at the same time, because if you have friends where maybe your interests don't overlap with other friends, that's fine. For example, I really like to read, and maybe I have a friend and our relationship is solely around books. I'm probably not going to introduce her to most of my friends because most of my friends don't read at the same level of like desire that I do, right? That's totally fine. But what I've noticed is we can meet up, we can have dinner, we can go out, but you will never meet their other friends. And it's often that their other friends, they are much closer to than, for example, me, right? And that I don't really get. And there's a million reasons why people do that. I know that people have previous negative experiences, so they don't want to do that. Then they feel like certain personalities don't match, so they don't want to do that. But I also tie it to like a networking point of view. And I'll say that culturally, I don't think that that is really a thing here, and it's not really prioritized. And if it is a thing here and I'm way off, please correct me. Always happy to be corrected. But from what I see, it's not really a thing. And most people that I know that have lived here for a very long time, most of their friends are from school. There's not a ton that's outside of that. And I think that's pretty common for anyone who is born and raised in the same place. But I do think that one thing I notice with North Americans even more so than I would say those from Toronto, but same kind of vibe, is the idea of like the web, like introducing people. Like I would never think to meet someone in Toronto and to not introduce them to my friends that I hang out with from school or whatever. Like that would never cross my mind, because chances are my friends have similar interests, especially if, we're going out or dinner or whatever. So I would think to do that. I also think it's like easier because I don't want to have 4 different coffee meetings maybe in a month or in the span of 2 weeks when I could have 2 or 3. That doesn't mean that friendships don't require one-on-one time and they don't require intimacy, because they do. But again, if it's a surface level interaction, why would I put very strict guardrails against that, right? Honestly, guys, I hope I'm making sense. If I'm not, just DM me on Instagram and be like, girl, what the fuck were you talking about? Because in my mind, it makes sense. But if I'm not, if I'm not rubbing 2 cents together, then let me know. You know where to find me, at Chantal Rousseau on all platforms. So yeah, that's friendship fatigue, right? And it's not about resentment or bitterness. It's really just like, hey, something is off balance here, and maybe you want to step back and evaluate. And I know I talked about compatibility a little bit earlier, and I want to emphasize that it's not about necessarily bad friends or good friends. That's not what this episode is about. And hopefully you're able to tell someone who is a bad friend or a good friend, or somewhere in the middle, because things do get complicated and things do get a little sticky, especially as we get older and our lives get a little bit more complicated than it was 10 or 20 years ago. But most of the time, we're going to assume that it's not some sort of betrayal. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about envy. This is not a woman who's bad mind. That's a completely different situation at which you should not ignore, but That's not really what we're talking about here. It's not intentional neglect. It's not that someone doesn't care about you. It's that the two of you are operating with totally different friendship styles. And we're just not taught to notice that or to pay attention. And I think that I can hear someone's brain going off being like, why is this so complicated? Why is it that deep? You're just friends, you hang out, and that's it. And I get you. I do. I think that if that is your situation with your friends, then that's a breeze. And that's also a privilege, but it might not always be like that. And I'm really speaking to the women, i.e., the woman myself, who's maybe at an apex where it's not looking like that. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. We talk about compatibility all the time in dating, like literally all the time. We analyze it to death. But in friendship, we just kind of assume that if we like each other or if we've known each other for a long time or the vibes are good, everything will just fall into place. And I want to emphasize that sometimes it does, and sometimes that's all it takes, but that's not necessarily the case all the time. And that's not necessarily the case for the entire duration of your friendship. Hence, we're in our 30s and things maybe are looking or shaping up to be a little different. And that could be for a million different reasons. There's a few different ways to look at compatibility, and I'm going to outline 4. One is emotional compatibility, lifestyle compatibility, intimacy compatibility, and then finally, effort compatibility. So let's go. I want to break this down in a relatively simple way. Emotional compatibility is how you both communicate. How deep are you willing to both go? How often do you check in? This is really like, I love you, thank you so much, very affirming words, whether you process things quickly or slowly together, whether you need conversation to feel close, or whether proximity is enough for you. If you're someone who builds intimacy through depth and honesty, and your friend maybe keeps everything light or very surface, that's an emotional mismatch. Not drama, just very different wiring on what you both love, need, and require. 2, lifestyle compatibility. This is huge. This is very huge, especially for me because I'm in my 30s. I moved abroad. I live in a big city. I'm not married and I don't have children. I also work for myself / work from home. So lifestyle compatibility is very, very, very important, but it's something that I'm also very flexible on because my lifestyle, I don't want to say it's niche because that makes it sound like it's like fringe or something. I don't like live and work like on a circus and I'm just traveling around the country, but it's not as stationary and or traditional as a lot of other people. It can also be a little bit boring, but it's schedules, seasons of life, priorities, how you both use your time. Maybe I'm a morning person and my best friend is a night owl. That's definitely not going to work for me. If I had a friend who was like, oh, I just want to like talk on the phone at 2 a.m. It's like, no, I'm in REM sleep at 2 a.m. Like I can't do it. And honestly, I've never been able to do it. Even when I was a kid, my siblings used to laugh at me because 10 p.m., like I was easily in bed. When they were staying up watching movies, I was like, no, it's bedtime. And I'm still like that. All these years later. Some people are just in a phase where they can fit friendship in between everything else. And some people need friendships that feel intentional and not squeezed in. This is definitely something that I've noticed in my own life. Whether I'm being squeezed in or not, it needs to feel intentional. I'm definitely not the friend that you can just kind of be like, hey girl, like, let me just squeeze you in because da-da-da. Like, no, it's okay. Like, it's okay. Now, I believe that you can squeeze in friends and still be intentional. One of my close friends doesn't live in London. She lives outside of London. And when she's coming into the city, she'll be like, hey, I'm coming in this day and time. Like, can you meet for coffee? Da-da-da-da. Technically, she's squeezing me into her day, but I know that she's still making the effort, and I can also flip it on her and be like, hey, like, let's plan something. Because sometimes it doesn't work out. And her day's really tight. And it's like, yeah, I don't actually want to rush and meet you for a 30-minute coffee at King's Cross. Why don't we just wait until you have some time and I have some time? It's all about the way you go about it. And also if you care. Some people just don't care. And I think that also becomes pretty obvious. If you're in 2 completely different rhythms all the time, you're always going to feel out of sync. And maybe that's fine. She can be like a medium friend, as Tink says. And I think that's fine. As long as you're both on the same page and no one wants more out of the relationship than each other. Number 3, intimacy compatibility. So this one's also pretty underrated. How do you express closeness? Some people show love through planning, through presence, through deep conversation, through spontaneous hangs, through weekly check-ins, through daily check-ins. If your intimacy language doesn't match theirs, you'll constantly feel like you are chasing someone and you're giving something that they are not giving back, even if they care. I once met a woman who we didn't really know each other very well, but she wanted to speak on the phone. And I don't love speaking on the phone to people. It's not something that I enjoy, which is pretty odd because there's nobody that can send a 20-minute voice note like me. And I have my own podcast and I could yap all day. But being on the phone, I think, is very intimate and for really close relationships. I just don't have that much to say to most people in my life. So why are we on the phone? It just doesn't sit. I don't want to sit on the phone. We have to really have something to talk about, or we're so close that comfortable silence is also okay. But this is different. She wanted to talk on the phone and I was like, no, for me, that's not how I get close to someone, is through being on the phone. I also feel like if I'm meeting someone new and it's a new relationship in my life, or even one that is still in a maintenance building phase, we need to see each other and we need to hang out. That is how we are going to build closeness. It's not going to be through Instagram or excessive text messaging. We need to meet up, go for coffees or dinners or walks or whatever, but quality time being spent together, not on the phone. But that's just a me thing. If you agree with me, definitely let me know, because I feel like being on the phone with just any and anyone is like very odd to me. And then finally, number 4 is effort compatibility. I mean, everything hinges on effort, right? It's basically, do we both give a shit about this friendship in a real way? Do we both maintain this friendship at similar levels? Doesn't have to be 50-50. Does it feel like we both care in ways that the other person can actually feel? Some people naturally initiate. That can be me depending on the mood that I'm in. Some people naturally respond. Some people naturally are very nurturing, like sending text messages, checking in. How are you doing? How are you doing? Even if maybe like they're not planning hangs as much. And some people just naturally float. I think the reason why I'm even talking about this with you guys and what's going through my mind, as much as I always say I'm in the trenches with you, like I'm in the arena with you, it's because I actually am. I just think I'm at the point now where I have always, not always, but I have definitely been an initiator. One thing that I think I've learned also is I can overfunction in my relationships. And I think because I've done a lot of the intimate self-work and I've done a lot of therapy, I can rationalize a lot of behavior because I can intellectualize it. Like not, oh, it's okay that you were mean to me, but I can peel back and be like, okay, this is where it's coming from. This is her trauma. Like this is her, you know what I mean? Which is cool, kinda, because you are extending empathy and you are taking your ego out of it and you're looking at it in as neutral as a way as possible. But it doesn't make you feel any better. You are also not feeling the situation. You're just thinking about it, and it can cause you to overfunction. And that is something that I've been guilty of, I would say, definitely over the last 3-ish years. And it's something that I think I'm starting to reach like the end of my bandwidth, basically. I'm learning my lesson. And I think that none of these are inherently wrong on surface level. It's just that they're not compatible. And I think I'm at the point in my life now where I want good people around me. I want close friends around me. And I want them to feel the same way about me. And if there's a mismatch in terms of how we genuinely feel about each other and how we genuinely want to show up for each other, then it just has to be pushed to like a medium or low effort type of friend. I can't. And I guess that's not true. I can. I just don't want to anymore. And I think once you start looking at your friendships through the lens of real compatibility, I think everything changes. I think the entire dynamic makes a lot more sense. And it also feels maybe a lot less personal. I also think that doesn't mean that any of your friendships need to change or need to be eliminated. I think it just gives you clarity to know where they stand for you in your life, but based on your perception and based on their actions, where you stand for them in their lives. And relationships ebb and flow. You guys can always get closer and you guys can always pull back from each other as well. It doesn't have to ever be fixed, but it requires two to tango. I want to go a little bit deeper and I want to walk you through some very real examples of incompatibility that show up in our friendships in our 30s and 40s. Things that you might not even really clocked as incompatibility just yet, but they do explain a certain type of fatigue that you might be feeling or you might feel in the future. So here are some examples of incompatibility in friendship. So the first one, you'll know this feeling immediately, is a friendship that only really moves the needle when you move it. You're suggesting dinner, you're the one texting to follow up, you're the one saying, okay, let's actually lock in a date. And if you stopped for a month, the whole thing would probably go silent. And what's happening is that there's just a lack of effort and closeness. Like, maybe she loves you, maybe she doesn't. Can't really tell based on that information, but there's a mismatch of some degree. And some people genuinely don't want to think about planning or initiating, so they're happy when someone else takes the lead. And in their mind, the friendship is solid, whether you talked last week or 3 months ago. But for you, that connection feels real when there's some intentionality behind it. And carrying that structure can be very exhausting. And in a situation like that, you have to be honest. Like, hey, babe, let's do Royal Opera House on July 13th. And then maybe once it's over, you're like, okay, next outing you plan, I'll leave the ball in your court. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of letting them know, like, okay, next one you plan. There's lots of friend groups and relationships where it's like, okay, I plan this date night, next month you plan it. It's really no different. If it doesn't happen, then you know where you stand. You show up to every hangout already a little bit tired because you've done all the mental work just to make it happen. And if you're a type A girly and you love doing that, then by all means, rock on. But if you're feeling a heaviness, it's because there's a mismatch. And I think that you should be honest with your friends. Okay, so another one is like depth only goes one way. And I'm going to expand on this, but you're bringing depth to the space without thinking about it, right? So you're asking genuine questions, real questions, follow-up questions. You're processing out loud. You're holding space for them. You're giving thoughtful responses. But when you share something meaningful and you want the other person to kind of deliver, they just really stay on the surface or they revert it back to them. And it gives you like, one, I just think it's like annoying. And it's also just bad form being a conversationalist. Like a good conversation is like a game of tennis or a game of ping pong. Like you have to be able to give and receive, right? The example that I'm going to use is that it also has to be at the same speed, right? Because if someone is really like wailing it in tennis or badminton or ping pong, you can't just then go slow. You have to deliver at the same speed at which they're giving to you. So that goes for conversation and giving emotional depth when you're in it as well. And it usually just points to, one, maybe the person just doesn't trust you. I think that's a huge thing. Like they don't want to divulge because they don't fully trust. And maybe you trust them more than they trust you. That is 1000% possible. Two, you might not have the range. And that's not always like insulting. It's just more that what they are talking about and what they need help with, you're not able to deliver. So maybe what's on their mind is something very heavy and you just can't really speak to that. That can be true for like moms. Like maybe you're having like a mom issue and you want to talk to your friend about it, but your friend is like a certified party girl and you're like, yeah, she doesn't have the range. Maybe she does and she can surprise you, but maybe she doesn't, you know? Or you're buying a home and you're knee deep in like taxes and stamp duty and all these things. And you're talking to your friend who literally lives with her parents and has never moved out. Probably can't help. She can be empathetic, but that's probably as far as it's going to go. I do think that for me, I wouldn't say this is a red flag, but it tends to be a bit of an amber one because it's also very uncomfortable to sit across from someone and feel like you are being honest and giving depth to the conversation that the relationship warrants. This is also very important. Trauma dumping is not that great. Maybe on your friends, it's somewhat okay, but on people you're not super close with, not great. And I've been on the receiving end of that, not once, but twice with virtual strangers. But if I'm sitting across from someone and I feel like I'm making a bid for connection, referencing the Gottman's work, as I do very often, and a bid for connection is like I'm giving an olive branch, I'm extending something so that we can be connected in this moment further than small talk or surface level, and you note my bid for connection and don't give one back, that then develops a lack of trust in you. Because if you don't trust me enough to be honest and be at the same level emotionally as I am, then it makes me want to share less with you. For example, if I'm talking to my single friend about dating and dating troubles and this, that, and the third, and she's just listening and giving a listening ear and empathetic, and has nothing to add to the conversation, that might be a little problematic. Now, she could be just being a good listener, but eventually you're going to clock onto that. Is she always such a good listener? Or does she just not want to share her personal life? And those are two very different things. And this can show up in a friendship as just feeling half heard, slightly untrustworthy, and not a good place to build from. Finally, an example number 3 is an inconsistent availability pattern. So this is when someone is always slammed and always busy when you want to meet, but they clearly have energy for like other plans. You maybe run into them out, you see them with other people. They're living life. They're definitely going out. It's just not in ways that include you. So maybe a good way of like forming this is like, okay, so you're like, hey girl, let's do this together. Or hey girl, let's go to this dinner. Or hey girl, are you interested in XYZ? I saw it on the 23rd and I really want to go. Busy, doesn't get back to you in due course, but sends you text messages. You guys have conversation, but you can never really nail down plans. However, maybe you follow each other on socials and you see them out often. So they're definitely living their life. They're definitely leaving the house. They're definitely being social. They just can't really find time to do that with you. What do you do with that, right? And this can tap into lifestyle and priority alignment. Some people organize their social energy around high stimulation events or group settings because it's easier for them to show up in those environments. They could also be prioritizing other friends. They would rather hang out with XYZ because of XYZ. Whatever the reason is, it doesn't really matter. Like maybe you're always reaching out because you want to do something in a group, but they would really just prefer to hang out one-on-one. When those kind of styles collide, the friendship can feel a bit uncertain. Maybe you want quality time and they have energy for group experiences. You want to hang out in the day, they only want to hang out at night. You know what I mean? And it can feel confusing because maybe nothing is explicitly wrong, but something still feels very off, right? And over time, it just really creates a low-grade emotional fatigue and it puts a wedge between you, frankly put. And those are the kind of things that I'm talking about that are really hard to name and aren't blatant disrespect, but also feel too noticeable to ignore. Obviously, these are only 3 examples and they do cover a lot of ground, but there's so much more and it's only a fraction of the complications that can show up in adult friendship. Once you start noticing these things, it becomes clear that so much of the tension we carry in our friendships comes from really mismatched styles and mismatched priorities, rather than big dramatic conflicts that I feel like, 1, we spot much easier, and 2, everyone has language, discourse, and history about. But these are actually the more insidious ways that we need help and coaching on when it comes to our friendship. And with that said, before I get into the next set of examples, I want to take a second to share, of course, I've got open coaching slots before the end of the year. If you want to go into 2026 a lot more clear-headed and need a little bit of advice to help you get in that direction, I'm absolutely here. You can buy 1 session or a set of 3. All the information, as per usual, is in the show notes. I look forward to connecting. So before we talk about what we can actually do about this, I want to mention a few more ways, just rapid fire style, in how you might have a bit of friendship incompatibility. One can be like, they take forever to get back to you, but when they need something, they need it ASAP. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's an emotional rhythm that's not being prioritized. 2, vent-only dynamic. They only know your number when they want to just unload, trauma dump, but they never really bring you update after the storm has passed. There's nothing really being delivered other than their sadness and their grief in the moment. They're also not interested thoroughly in what's going on with you. You're really just involved in the lows of their life and they need you for advice, but that's pretty much it. Number 3 is they only reach out when other plans fall through. Again, feeling very penciled in and slotted in into someone's life. Maybe there's affection there, but you can feel the hierarchy, right? You can feel it. It's like, this girl can only call me when XYZ has flopped on her. You're just not the person that they start with. And that's not a nice feeling. An energetic misalignment. Maybe you're someone to send very thoughtful voice notes. You send very thoughtful, detailed text messages. And you get very like half-assed, lazy, short responses. It's like they're listening, but they're not really present. Maybe their tone feels very rushed or distracted. I think this one is an easy fix, but still not a good feeling. 5, maybe you've known each other for a very long time, but the closeness that you feel is mostly based on history and not your current dynamic. The friendship thoroughly relies on nostalgia and your present day relationship just feels very thin. I always think a very telling sign about relationships like this is if you were to meet today, would you be friends? And Yeah, that I think is a really good barometer for any relationship, to be honest. I do want to say that sometimes it's a no, and that doesn't mean that you guys can't be friends, you know? And then finally, the emotional downgrade. Maybe the friendship used to have really good depth. You guys were really rocking with each other for quite some time. And now everything has kind of remained very surface level. Memes, maybe Instagram replies, quick hits, nothing really serious, and nothing bad has happened. Your relationship has just shifted and it's downgraded. And that can be very gut-wrenching. That can be very heartbreaking, but it is what it is. Not everyone is going to be on the ride the whole time. When you start naming these patterns and you're able to really articulate where your friends and the relationship kind of categorize itself, you realize that many of the frustrations you've internalized don't necessarily come from a lack of effort on either part. Sometimes it's just the shape of the friendship itself. And once you can see that for what it is clearly, you can actually decide how you want to engage with it moving forward, if at all. And that's what it is. And that's what I'm always going to push is I want to empower you guys with the knowledge, and then you decide what you want to do. It doesn't have to be either or, as long as you know. So let's talk about what we're going to do with all this information, how you're going to recalibrate your life without really blowing anything up, unless you want to. You don't also want to force conversations that won't land, and you don't want to abandon yourself, of course, in this process. So let's talk about how we kind of recalibrate and get to a better place in our relationships without drama. Okay, once you start seeing these things and you're like, okay, not loving this, what do you do? What do you actually do with all this information? Because you don't want some big dramatic friendship breakup. I really don't think that that's necessary most of the time. Recalibration is usually much quieter, and it's just small shifts into where you put your energy, and then you'll have to notice how you feel and if it's working for you. So number one, I would say reduce your output. First things first is you got to take your foot off the gas. You got to stop being the engine. You got to give the dynamic some space and see what happens on its own. Does the relationship have momentum? I think is a really good neutral way of gauging your relationship with any relationship, I would say. And it's not about punishing anyone or being mean. It's really just about breaking the habit of over-functioning. We talked about this earlier. When you stop carrying the whole thing, you will be able to clearly see what the friendship is without you propping it up. Does it have foundation? Ideally, you hope that it does. And if it doesn't, that's also okay, but you need to know that first before you move on to any other steps. Number two, you need to adjust your expectations, right? Start expecting this person to show up the way they actually show up, not the way you wish they would. This is something we shouldn't do in dating, so we probably shouldn't do it in our friendships either. If someone hasn't shown you emotional depth or consistency or a book club hangout or a nightlife hangout or a travel invite by now, it's kind of unfair to yourself to keep waiting for them to suddenly become that friend that you want. Once your expectations match their actual capacity, things will feel lighter. You stop being disappointed because you're not waiting for a version of them that doesn't exist for you specifically. This is key. Number three, you're going to protect your energy. I know it sounds very TikTok woo-woo and a bit like self-indulgent and annoying, but it's true. When you are the emotionally literate or always available friend in your dynamic, because you might not be that person in all of your friendships, people lean. They lean on you and they lean hard, but you don't have to be there every single time in every single facet. It's not a job, right? You don't necessarily have to hold space when you feel depleted, but also you can't have community without convenience. So I know that you gals are very smart. There's a lot of nuance and context on the Sage sorority and texture. So I don't have to make a million disclaimers, but we know how to read between the lines, right? Boundaries can be simple. Showing your response time when you need it, not taking on every crisis, choosing when you actually have the capacity to listen and to receive. Obviously, you're still caring. You're just not carrying people's entire lives. I hope that makes sense. Number four, put more effort into what is actually working. You know exactly who these people are. Being around them feels easy. The relationship is a give and take. There's no scorekeeping. There's no managing emotional temperature. There's no adjusting yourself to make things smoother. They show up. You show up. They ask questions. You ask questions. They remember things. You remember things. Those are the friendships that deserve more of your time, simply put. Number five, letting close friend maybe mean something different now. This is definitely a hard pill to swallow, but as we age, definitions can sometimes change, and we should be open to that. Closeness in your teens and closeness in your 20s and closeness in your 30s look different. When we were younger, it was about proximity, convenience, maybe group chats, school, crappy jobs. I always say the crappiest jobs introduce you to the best people, constant weekend plans. Closeness in your 30s is maybe more about shared values, emotional safety, actual consistency, but they can also be proximity, convenience, group chats, and constant weekend plans. You are allowed to shift people into different categories without making it a big deal. And you can love someone and still recognize that they're not a central part of your life anymore, and that is okay. It doesn't mean that the friendship is any less meaningful. It just looks differently now. And when you're making these shifts on your own terms, I hope that you feel lighter by doing it. There might be a little bit of grief because maybe you realize that you don't have the type of friends that you wish in certain categories. But I hope that there's no resentment, there's no exhaustion, and you start to begin to focus on friendships that actually feel good. But there's another layer, and I alluded to it, the emotional side, the grief that comes with having to adjust your expectations or realizing that a friendship isn't what it used to be or isn't what you hoped it would be. So let's talk about it. Even when nothing dramatic happens, even when you still care about the person, even if the friendship is really not going anywhere, there can be like a quiet sadness when you realize that it just doesn't sit where it used to or where you want it to. And it can feel like maybe you're losing a version of the friendship that only existed in your head. Maybe you're losing potential. Maybe you're losing a bit of optimism, or one that was real many years ago but hasn't been present in a long time. And either way, the loss hurts, right? There's grief in recognizing that you've changed, they've changed, or your lives just don't overlap in the way that they used to or in the way that you had hoped. And sometimes it's not even about the friend. It's about who you were when that friendship was at its best, the nostalgia, the comfort, the identity you maybe had back then. Letting that go can feel like you're losing a piece of yourself. But hopefully what can help is that when you stop holding on to the fantasy version of a friendship, you can actually engage better with whatever it is now. Even if that's lighter, even if that's heavier, even if that becomes nothing. You get to be honest about it, and you stop trying to force something that really just can't be anymore or that never was. And most of the time, I stand on this, it really doesn't need to be dramatic. You don't need a confrontation. You don't need a big statement. You don't need a blowout. It's really just a shift. You don't have to be hurt about what they're not doing because you can accept what they are, even if that's nothing. You stop trying to revive something that has naturally changed or has not developed in the way that you thought. And you have to begin to focus on the connections that feel right for who you are right now. And my dear darling sage, if you're like, I don't have those, I feel you. I get it. Then you give yourself the bandwidth and the space to go and find it. And also let it find you. This is where compatibility really helps. And it lets you see that changing someone's role in your life doesn't erase the history and doesn't make it sour. It just really helps to clarify and respect and give space to what is accurate and true and real for right now. So I hope that this gives you guys a lot of clarity on friendship and maybe gets your brain tingling a little bit. Obviously, as we head deeper into December, this can be a very emotional and heavy month for some people. I hope that this gives you clarity around your friendships, not in a really harsh way, but in a grounded, self-aware, honest way. Listen, you deserve the friendships that you believe you deserve and that you are willing to invest into. The friendships that feel reciprocal and emotionally safe. Friends that match who you are and who you're becoming. And part of that is recognizing when a dynamic isn't fitting. It's stretched thin, it's mismatched, or it's running more on history than anything else. You are allowed to choose ease. You are allowed to focus on people who meet you where you are. And there's nothing wrong with shifting certain friendships without feeling guilty about it. If this brought up anything heavy for you, please sit with it, journal it, talk to a really good friend about it. Notice which friendships feel good and maybe which ones feel a little bit heavier than you would prefer. That awareness alone really helps to change things and can guide you as you're moving forward. And of course, if you think someone needs to hear this, a friend, a bestie, a cousin, a sister, a coworker, definitely share it with them. I love you guys so much. I'm always so happy that you're here. You've been rocking with me since February. 52 episodes is almost around the corner. Don't you worry, there will be no breaks. So I will have an episode for you on Christmas Day. Your girl is not going to leave you hanging. First of all, because not everyone celebrates Christmas. And if you do celebrate Christmas, I want to have a little flavor in your ear on the 25th. So I'm going to have something for you on the 25th, and I will have something for you on New Year's Day, I will be a year older. I will, God willing, not be hungover, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to have something for you. I hope December is being good to you no matter what. I hope you are leaning into the festive season, even if that just means doing nothing. I'm here for it. I love you guys so much. Like I always say, I will talk to you same place, same time next Thursday. Have a good week. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you. Bye.